Your car? It's probably spying on you. Every time you start your car, plug in your seatbelt, stop suddenly, accelerate. There's a good chance your car is recording it, packaging it, and sending it off. But here's what's crazy. Car companies aren't just using this data for legitimate things like recalls or maintenance. They're selling it, and according to them, you gave them permission.
We were shocked to see privacy policies referring to sex life, genetic data, and race or ethnicity.
Why are car companies spying on drivers? How are you agreeing? And who's buying that data?
It can be used to justify raising my rates.
We investigated, and we found a hidden economy that stretches far past your driveway. It involves more manufacturers than you'd think, with the data being used against you in ways that could cost you hundreds or even thousands of dollars.
It was more of like kind of like a horror story. My name's Mike Tarana, and I drive a 2023 Chevy Bolt EUV.
Last year, Mike read an article about GM spying on drivers through OnStar. His car had OnStar.
I've always been a very private person, and I was super scared, so I clicked on some of the links in that article and requested my data.
The data showed up weeks later. Mike expected it to show the boring stuff.
Things like battery charge status, charging locations where I charge the most.
But that's not what he found.
The first page is like a big tally of like the common things. Driving at night, harsh stops, sudden accelerations. Around 5:30 every single day was the same, near-miss collision, small object. I get off work at 5 o'clock, it takes about 30 minutes to drive home. When I pull into my driveway and my cats, run into the carport because they're so excited that they're gonna be fed, this is the data point. Me having a small near-miss collision every day is my cat running in front of my car and me stopping.
Mike's data, even though it was inaccurate, eventually came back to haunt him and may have ultimately cost him hundreds of dollars. The thing is, his story is not unique. It's not even unusual.
The automotive industry's general approach to privacy could be summed up in one word: permissive, but not in the way that benefits people.
In 2023, the Mozilla Foundation did something most of us would never do. They actually read the privacy policies.
We wanted to ask the simple question, what does your car know about you? Cars were worse than anything we've studied. All 25 brands we reviewed collected more personal data than necessary, and none of them met our minimum security standards. We were shocked to see privacy policies referring to sex life, genetic data, and race or ethnicity.
Lauren pointed out that just because they can collect data about your sex life doesn't mean that they will. But here's what we know for sure that they're taking.
They're collecting things like personal data, biometric data, social data, and not letting anybody really understand how it's being used or who it might be sold on to.
And here's the thing. Car manufacturers aren't denying it. They say everything they're doing is outlined in the privacy policy. I pulled up my car's policy. It's spread out across half a dozen documents. There's around 100,000 words in them. If this was a book, it would be longer than 1984 and take over 5 hours to read.
Most people do not read most privacy policies.
That's Justin Sherman, a data privacy expert who's testified before Congress about this exact problem.
Talking to the commission about what those threats are.
People don't read them, they don't understand them, and so the idea that that equals affirmative, expressed, freely given consent is patently false.
This is what car companies call consent. To find out what happens once you consent, we talked to experts, read through the court cases, and traced Mike's data. It led us to a pipeline most people don't know exists that connects their steering wheel directly to an insurance company, costing them real money. First, GM packaged Mike's every move and analyzed it internally. Some of this was legitimate, recalls and maintenance analysis. Then they sold it to data brokers, LexisNexis and Verisk, companies that exist to buy and sell your personal data. Had you ever heard of LexisNexis?
No, I hadn't. But the level of data that they had on me was frankly terrifying.
So many of these companies operate in the shadows, they NDA their clients, they hide their revenue and their activities. The biggest brokers make billions of dollars a year.
Right now, the North American data market is slightly smaller than the entire US fast food industry, and it's growing fast, largely because of AI.
More companies want more types of your data to train these different AI models.
But Mike's data didn't just train some opaque system. LexisNexis and Verisk transformed it into something much more concrete, a risk score that can follow him everywhere.
And this kind of behavioral telemetry gives insurers granular insight to risk assessment, often more than what's self-reported or inferred from a claims history.
Hard brakes, small object near miss, quick accelerations. That makes the score worse, and it gets sold to insurance companies, with General Motors getting a cut.
We see this person braking too hard, we're going to raise their rates.
Since 2019, car insurance rates are up over 40%, and it's tough to pinpoint exactly why. There's a lot of plausible reasons. Rising vehicle prices, overall inflation, the general economy. But there's a growing chorus of people who think this data is having an impact.
For me, having this concrete data point that GM and OnStar gave this information to my insurance company, and I can easily see how from reading that LexisNexis report, it can be used to justify raising my rates. My rates did increase.
This happened to countless GM customers.
Her insurance had gone up 80%, and when she tried to shop around, an insurance broker suggested she check her LexisNexis records to see why.
If you're thinking, this can't be legal, you're not alone. Since 2024, Arkansas, Nebraska, and Texas have all sued General Motors and OnStar. They all say GM used deceptive tactics to build this data pipeline from day one.
How it was put to me was to get your car set up with data so you can see your current battery status or how long it'll take to reach a full charge.
Of course, buried somewhere in that document, Mike had agreed to let them sell his data to insurance companies. It turns out this approach was pretty common.
We think that the incentives at a lot of these dealerships were such that people were opted in even if they didn't want to be opted in.
The lawsuits allege that in some cases, GM just signed people up for the service and prayed they'd never notice. In 2025, in response to the New York Times reporting, the Federal Trade Commission banned GM from selling driver data for 5 years. They also have to get affirmative consent before tracking and allow consumers to opt out. So when Mike tried to exercise those new rights, what did he find?
And I noticed at the bottom, for battery electric vehicles, even if you decline to enroll in OnStar, GM may still collect, use, or disclose certain data as described in the applicable owner's manual. Even if you decline, they say, well, that's too bad. You bought the car, so we have your implicit okay for it.
GM is under an FTC order. They face big fines if they violate it. If this is what compliance looks like, then the rules clearly aren't working. And General Motors isn't alone.
There are too many car companies and too many services plugged into these car companies to think that's the only case of this happening.
Nearly every major brand is getting sued now. The class action cases want an end to the practice and money for the victims. The fundamental issue isn't individual companies. We don't have real rules in the first place.
Right now, we really lack comprehensive regulations on this. The biggest one is FCRA, the Fair Credit Reporting Act.
That law is over 50 years old, written for credit reports, not connected cars.
It's so important that we have regulation around these issues so that there is a single standard that everybody knows their car is kind of meeting.
For the larger data broker industry, there's virtually nothing at the national level. Only 4 states even require data brokers to register. None put real limits on how they operate.
There are many gaps there. They don't explicitly govern how an insurance company can buy data from a car to inform their pricing.
In 2024, there was a Senate investigation. A bipartisan group of senators proposed legislation that would fix some of this. Explicit consent, national standards, real rules around what car manufacturers can collect and sell. But until Congress acts, companies are writing their own rules. If you liked what you just watched, please like and subscribe. And if you have an idea for future stories, please leave them in the comments.